driving me bonkers. Why is this not working? Ugh. You guys, you drive me bonkers. Not gonna even lie to you. Let's see. I don't think if I change the sound now, no, because it keeps doing that, and I don't know why. Urgh. Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. No, now I'm gonna have to exit out of this. Redo it. Sorry, you guys. I just keep having some audio, like the audio on my Podbean just keeps transferring to something else. And no, I don't want to do this. Hello, 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 hello. Oh, yeah, there it goes. Hi, everybody. Ah, yay, it worked. Okay. This is Natalie coming to you live, Spirit and Coffee. Don't know why the audio wasn't working. Now it's working. Thank God. Okay. I didn't have to redo it. Thank heavens. Okay, let's get started. Please chime in. I would say that your participation makes this a lot more fruitful for everybody. And I love to hear from you guys and love to hear what you guys have to say because I love to hear from people. I love what people are up to in their life. It makes me so happy, especially when people are working on their goals. Okay, let's see. And I love to hear from you guys. Okay, there we go. Yay, it's all set up. Sometimes I just wish that I could go back to the old school way of doing things, which was get up and just put the phone up and then just do it. And you know, it just seems like everything gets more complex. Of course, I don't have this big production team. It's just me by myself trying to figure out how to use technology. And trust me, I am probably not the best person at that because, well, I like to put my brain power towards other things. So there. So if you're a technical person and you want to help me figure things out, let me know. That'd be great. Okay, so let's get started. So we were talking yesterday about shame, and I think that it was a pretty fruitful conversation. I feel like people were, chiming in, and I think this is such a hard topic for individuals. I had my class last night for my master's class, and we were talking about this particular affect of shame, this particular feeling sensation, and it is a new emotion that has arisen in humanity, which is interesting because really it only seeks to cause pain and suffering. So a lot of what we were talking about last night was pain. Why pain? Why is there pain? Why do we have to have pain? And for me, when I think about pain, pain for me is like, oh, pain is really for me about physical pain. When I think about pain, I think about physical pain, but people suffer mental pain and all these other types of pain, right? So there's mental, emotional pain that people experience in their life. And so for me, I'm thinking, well, okay, so pain, why do we have to have pain? And that was something that the professor asked. So why do you think? And I'm like, I don't think we'll ever know why pain is there or why we experience pain. Like, we can sort of come up with a construct of why. Well, maybe pain is there to help us grow, maybe pain is there to help us advance. Or and then I asked the question, I said, well, do you think maybe pain is there for survival? Like, anytime an organism is in pain or suffering, that it's the body's indication or an indication that something needs to change to avoid death. And I think that was the response was, yeah, that the mechanism itself of pain is to keep us out of harm's way from not dying in order to survive. But here's the difference, right? We have pain in our mind. And I mean, like, our mental, not necessarily physical. It could become physical, but it's this mental pain that we carry. And the mental pain, it's like, well, okay, so I have this mental pain, but it's not really pain. So the new construct of pain, right, could be the sensation of shame. Like, I'm shameful, right? I'm inadequate, I'm unworthy. And the shame shows up and it causes this anguish, right, in our head, in our minds, in our bodies, right? It does show up in our bodies eventually, but we're trying to avoid it at all costs. And that's typically what happens. We try to avoid pain. Our body and everything within us wants to avoid pain. Okay. Good morning, Hillard. So, and you guys, please, like I said, share. If I love when you guys, share. So, we try to avoid pain at all cost. Nobody wants to live in pain. And I'll tell you this, physical pain, okay? So I'm not talking about the mental pain, but even physical pain. Like about a month ago, I was in so much pain. Like for 8 hours straight, I was feeling pain. It was a constant pain, right, in my uterus. And it wouldn't go away, okay? And I was doing, I mean, at any point, I was like, just give me something. I don't even care. Give me morphine, at that point, I just wanted something so it could go away, right? We get to that point of pain where we will do nearly anything to avoid feeling it or experiencing it, okay? And so that's why there's been, right, that's why we have all of these Demerol, morphine. When you go into, if you go into a hospital, you break a leg or you have a severe injury, typically we have receptors that will numb the pain out for us. But literally the body will go into shock so much that it'll pass out. Like I threw up. That's how much I couldn't handle it anymore, the pain. That's how bad it was. That my body literally is rejecting it. It's trying to get rid of it. It doesn't want the pain. And that's what happens with us, right? As humans, we don't want the pain. We don't want the pain. So we're going to try to escape it at all cost, whatever that is for us. We're going to try to escape it and get rid of it and move away from it. Now, the difference between the mental pain and the physical pain, right? There's a difference. And is this freezing? Oh man, come on. Tell you. Let's look at this. And I want to talk about the mental pain. Technology. It just drives me nuts. Okay. It's still going. There it goes. Okay. I want to talk about the mental pain and then the physical pain being the same. They could be the same, but they're actually, I don't want to say they're different, but it's a stream. So physical pain, right, in the body is something that we experience, like stay away from or avoid, right? We're not going to put our hand in the fire and burn ourselves because it hurts. So we pull away. It's an avoidance mechanism. It allows us to stay out of harm's way. And that's what it's for. So what is shame for? What is shame really? Shame is the mental construct that was recently developed in the human psyche. The shame factor. And it's only something that humans do. We are the only ones who do shame and have that inadequacy or not worthy, and it causes mental pain in us, which then gets experienced in our neurotransmitters, our brain, our mind, and then that gets extended out into our physical being because our receptors, our brain, our molecules, everything talks to each other. And if there's stress there, then the body starts to respond to that stress and get sick. And that's why we say, well, people have a weak immune system and all this stuff. Well, why? Well, that's why. Because we're allowing ourselves to live in the pain rather than to release the pain, right? Release it. And I don't mean avoid it, because that's what people think. They think, oh, well, if I avoid it. And so we have these numbing techniques that we do as humans and self-sabotage. A lot of the self-sabotage will come in the form of addiction and an avoidance. And we use those addictions to avoid the mental anguish, the mental pain that is surfacing within us. So how do we deal with this, right? And vulnerability and authenticity are the two main ingredients, the surrender to it too. But it also is befriending those parts of us that we feel uncomfortable with. Being able to move through it, being able to talk about it, being able to express it, being able to communicate this with other people. Hey, Wise Mackie, how are you? And it's good to hear from you. Uh, so again, it's we befriend it, right? We work with it. We don't just act like it doesn't exist and say, "Oh yeah, that just no," and then just turn our heads. It's the ability to open up and be vulnerable and say, "Yeah, I'm weak in this area," and I told you guys about my spelling, right? I don't know how to spell, and I can read and write. And I'm a pretty darn good writer. And I can communicate, right? And I can add and I can do all these other things. But just because I can't spell doesn't mean that I'm not worthy, right? But in my mind, right, the story that played in my mind was this unworthiness, this inadequacy, this feeling of, oh my God, if somebody finds me out, they're not going to think I'm smart enough. They're not going to think, you know, they're not going to think I'm worthy of being a scholar. How could they? No, that's not true. Now we open up the space and give permission, right? And I talked about that the other day. Now, vulnerability is a courageous act. And for me, I mean, I understood it as a courageous act because I know that vulnerability sort of exposes you, right? It allows the space to be exposed. You're kind of opening up and you're like, okay, look at me. It's like someone gets to read you and it's like, well, read my thoughts. And that's kind of a scary place. Okay. So, so again, vulnerability for me, what I've realized and what the biggest takeaway that I got from, starting to open up to vulnerability is thinking it from a warrior perspective. And I talked about that yesterday. The warrior perspective of that, when you think about a warrior going into the arena, when you think about individuals who go into, like, when you think about the bullfighters, they were vulnerable. They're being vulnerable in their space. Good morning, Maddie. They're being vulnerable in the arena. They're stepping into the arena with, and they're being vulnerable. They're exposing their self. Okay. So again, it's the vulnerabilities, like opening up the womb and saying, okay, I'm exposed. Here I am. Because the deepest thoughts that we have sometimes were shameful for us. Maybe it gives us disgust, or maybe we don't want to tell people because we're afraid of the judgments, or we're afraid that they may not like it, or we may actually not have a sense of belonging. That's another thing. It's belonging. Make it a divine day. Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate you. um, that's the major default. Yeah. And so it's scary to talk about the things that are in the subconscious mind, or maybe expose ourselves to thoughts that we may be having. And because why? Because maybe we won't be accepted. We have this very deep sense of belonging. We want to belong, right? We want to be communal. We're communal creatures. We want to connect, and if we are if we're set outside of the norms, we don't want to say it. And I mean, we could see this at, okay, so we can look at it from our own perspective, right? Of isolating, like, I'm not good enough, so I'm going to isolate because if I'm exposed, I won't be accepted. So there's that rejection piece. But if we looked at it from the bigger issues, right, of society, let's just look, for me, it's like, look at people like the gay community back in the 80s, or even the 60s or the 70s, and they started to, they felt ashamed, right, because they were being ostracized by society. In other words, if they were revealed, they wouldn't get jobs, they wouldn't, they would be cut off from society as a whole. Okay. And then it took an act of somebody being vulnerable, okay, vulnerable, and opening up the dialogue and saying, hey, I'm gay, like just making it public. And then they have Milk, right? That was a politician who came out and said, hey, this is what I am. And it took vulnerability. There were people that rallied against him. We could see this even in abortion clinics, right? The pro-choice port. And I'm not getting into the political arena. I'm just trying to simply say that there are people, right, to be vulnerable, to not be accepted. to the belonging, right? We have that sense of belonging, and so we shame, we make people wrong, we judge them for what they do, and then they feel shameful and they don't want to talk about it. That is probably the worst thing that we can do if we're not accepting of other people's, right? Then what ends up happening? Well, then anger and frustration show up, and those emotions, right? Anger and frustration are good, but when anger turns to rage, that becomes violence. That becomes, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna, and then you see people fighting, and it gets crazy, right? So that's really what it is. It's that putting a lid on something because you feel inadequate, unworthy, or I'm going to be disconnected from society as a whole if I speak about it. Not an easy thing to do. Vulnerability says, oh, I'm going to open up the pot and I'm going to show you what's inside. And guess what? You're not going to probably like half the things. But here's the kicker. Everybody has those deep, dark thoughts in their head. So when we communicate them, we give permission for others to open up their mind and communicate. So believe it or not, there are more people in this world who probably have the same thoughts you do in your subconscious mind that you're ashamed of, that they're not talking about it. And they feel ashamed to talk about it, and so they're holding it inside. Let's see, a lid can be safe. This is why snacking. A lid can be safe for a short period to gain understanding, but not to dwell in such emotional frequencies. Yes, and that, I mean, the disconnect is if you're, so the part that you're talking about is what we call spiritual alchemy. And it's alchemy through dark emotions. And it's being able to reflect and get through those uncomfortable situations, get through the mental pain that we might be holding in, or understand or get clarity. But if we don't have an outlet to release it, right? It's like it's like the pot is boiling internally. And then some people can, get depressed. Some people, whatever it is for them, when they don't lift the lid, right? It can become cold and then depressed, right? I would say it like, let's see if we can do it like a stew. Let's see if we could do that analogy. So if you put the lid on the cold soup, it becomes depressed and toxic. If you have the fire to it, it becomes boiling and then spews out everywhere. So you could see it as both, right? The lid can either shut the flame off, but if the flame is too high and doesn't, the lid will come popping off. So it's finding that balance, right? Of like, how do I, so I'm going to keep the lid on, going to stew the soup, but then I'm going to take the lid off after it has completely brewed. That could be the alchemy, or it could be the way that you can visualize it, right? The visual effects of this work sort of help people relate to it internally, like in their body. I like to do models and charts. I think I'm a visual learner, so I'm constantly putting charts and models together so I can say, oh, here's how it maybe would look. And then the experience, of course, is different than maybe what it looks like, and perhaps the chart might look different for someone else, but it's at least a point, right? An analogy, a way that we can relate. Oh, okay, I see it, right? This emotional state, it's just, I'm putting a lid on it. I'm not allowing it to flow. And so the shame factor is huge. And I think I really like what one of my fellow classmates said. And, she said, she's like, I think shame is the pandemic, not what we're going through, but shame. And we shame ourselves for being shameful. So in other words, it's like this 2-layered thing. Like, I'm ashamed to be ashamed. So how do you get through that? How do you get through all of those? And it becomes this thing. And finding resiliency. And for individuals, some individuals, really, really, really hard to get through the shame, right? Because maybe they've been ostracized, and they've been separated, and they've been rejected so much that they don't know how to self-accept. And I've talked about this before, like the self-acceptance, the rejection. Self-acceptance, rejection. One is an external factor, one is an internal factor. The rejection comes from the external, the acceptance comes from the internal. And it's this cycle that goes on and on and on and on. And people with abandonment issues typically have high levels of rejection. They feel rejected. Too self-critical. Yeah. Are not the right proportions. Yeah. So it's how do you get there? That's the question. How do you support people with getting there? And for me, it's really just asking powerful questions, right? Of self-understanding. Yes. And I like when you're on here, Wise Matty, because you give your insight. I was like, come on, people, say something. um, so again, it's how do you start to? That's the biggest question, right? And it's like I question people. That's my thing. It's I ask powerful questions because literally we all have different experiences. We all have different ways of handling the trauma in our lives. We all have different traumas. We all have different ways that we have throughout the years, avoided it or, fight, flight, freeze with it. Whatever we did is the habitual patterns that we've created in our own self, and the story's different. The storyline's different. And how you heal or come to healing is going to be different. But part of that practice is vulnerability. It's vulnerability. It's being able to, and then being authentic about it. It's allowing them to recognize where they are from within and why. Yes. And that's the big kicker. That's the big thing. It's allowing them, giving them permission to do that. And that's why I love coaching. Coaching is one of my favorite things to do because it's not about what I say. It's not about, I can't give you your answers. You have them within you. And I know it sounds cliche, right? Because they're like, well, you have the answers within you. And you're like, well, what the hell is the answer? I don't know what it is. You're saying it's in me, but I don't even know what it is. I can't even find it. Where do I find it? Where do I look inside myself? I don't know. But a coach facilitates the questions that help you to discover, right? Sometimes we're just not asking the right questions, and that's really what it is. It's being able to ask ourselves powerful questions to get to the root and to understand. But sometimes the questions that we ask are not really leading us in the direction that we want to go. And a coach will say, okay, what about why this or this and that and the other? Do you think this because of this? Why this because of that? Tell me what your experience is with this. Let's see. The power of creationism with self-inclusion. Yes. Yes, it's a both and. I think that's what you're saying. And that's what that's what this is about. It's both and. It's not either or, it's a both and. And using all the resources available to you. Dialogue, not so much answers. So yeah, but the way that you internalize it, right? And the way that you say, okay, here's what's good for me, right? Is the way that you can move your life. So it's like, okay, I have this question. It's like working with individuals, right? By dialogue. Yeah, it is dialogue. And through that dialogue, then they're able to answer their own questions. So it's like, for instance, it'll be like this, right? When I'm coaching individuals, I go, okay, so I want to spend more time with my family. Okay. Are you spending time with them now? How much time do you want to spend with them? Why do you think you're not spending time with them? What's holding you back from spending time with them? I don't know. It's like they want me to say, okay, here, why don't you go do this and this and this with your family, and then you'll spend more time with them. But no, there's something holding them back from actually doing it. So what is the root of it? Oh, well, I don't have enough time because I'm so focused on work. Okay. So do you think you can create time? What's going on with work that you're doing? And then it becomes this thing where it digs deeper, 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 deeper into, okay, here's the issue. The issue is I'm a control freak at work, and I probably take on more than I should, and I don't let people do their work. Okay, now, right, now that we have that, we can direct it into a different, we say, okay, so is there any way that you can let go of some of that? What happens if you let go? of some of the work in trust. How do you build trust? Are you able to build trust? Yes, I am. Okay. Then it becomes this powerful thing where it started off here and we're ended up here because we're getting to the root of where it's coming from. How are they creating? Well, they have to understand that. They have to get deep, 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 and to understand where's the root of it, and then look at that and then say, okay. Otherwise, we're just putting perfume on stuff, and nothing really, and I'm not going to say anything really, really changes within us. We just become more self-aware of the circumstances that arise. Because we still go back, like you could still go back to being controlling. But you're going to practice trusting. So it becomes this practice where you're engaged in it, but doesn't mean that you're still not controlling. You're just learning how to deal with that. You're just learning how to mold it differently. There still might be aspects of control in there, but it may show up differently. And that's what you do. You mold it until you kind of see, oh, okay, I'm going in this direction. That's what I'm doing. Again, the subconscious mind, but to be able to dig deep, to be authentic, to actually be vulnerable, to open up, to allow yourself to create your best life, because that's what it's about, right? It's being able to give back to humanity, to get to a place of altruism. You know, we see the spiral dynamics. That's it's pretty interesting. The paradigms of consciousness, when we talk of spiral dynamics, they have these value memes where they talk about sort of what the values and principles were throughout the eras, right? That's kind of how they've constructed it. And it looks like we're just going right back to the beginning, of course, because it's a big loop. We're like, oh yeah, we did this stuff. Now we're in an egocentric world. And this egocentric world's not really working because now there's deforestation and we're taking up all the resources and we're displacing cultures, and we're saying that big industry is important, and then we're seeing this big backlash of human nature saying, well, you didn't even think about me. And so Mother Earth is saying, what are you doing? No, I don't think so. And so it's this battle between, right? And it's like, well, what are we going to do? People want to heal the planet. There's all these things that are coming up. There's even an ecophobia or something like that, where people are afraid because of the planet dying and all that stuff, right? So it's igniting these fears in people. I mean, it's just this big goulash of stuff. And the spiral dynamic says we'll just kind of return back to the beginning of these small living systems where we live off the earth and we're able to, but will we really get there? I don't know. I mean, for me, usually I'm optimistic. But in this kind of case, I say that I understand the egocentric people and people who are wanting to stay in control, right? The small percentage of big companies, owners and stuff, don't think they're going to go down without a fight. I don't think they're going to be like, yeah, everybody go back to your small communities. We don't even know how. We probably wouldn't survive, at least in the Western world. I don't think I mean, I probably could, but it would be a whole different world, right? So we want our comforts. But if you looked at spiral dynamics, and I highly encourage that you look at that, it's quite interesting. It's like, oh yeah, this is where holism lives and exists. Holism tells us that we're going to integrate everything that we unlearned and we're going to relearn it. It's like, what? And I hope that we do, because now we're looking at the future generations, right? So many people see the bigger picture. Yeah. And that's the big thing. So spiral dynamics too, yeah, cannot see the bigger picture, right? Spiral dynamics allows you to see things in the construct of the like, again, the bigger structure. We've gone into the quantum, we've gone into the external, but if we looked at things as living systems, living organisms that are interconnected, and it's more like a web of life, right? It's like a spider web, and that's what I've talked about before, is that everything impacts the other. You can't, it's again, yeah, I love the quantum, so do I. So when we talk about a human being, okay, and I talked about this talk about human being, Well, the human itself, we can take a look at the different organs within the human being and say, oh, yeah, well, the heart has issues, it's clogged. So we're going to just take, we're going to give you this pill, but it's going to help just the heart. But that's not even where the issue's coming from, right? Because it could be the blood, and it could be the this and that, and you can't just say that it's one part of the organism, because it all interconnects together. And this is why medicine, or Western medicine, doesn't work, because it's picking apart the different pieces, and you have specialization in this, specialization in this, and then what you end up doing is going all over the place. You end up going from this specialist to that specialist. Nobody's talking to each other. You end up like a lab rat. And before you know it, they're like, let's just take out your gallbladder. What do you mean? That's my gallbladder. Like, that belongs in there. What, you take it out, and then you take it out, and I have pills and have to be dependent upon other stuff, because that organ was meant to produce stuff and do stuff in my body. Take out your uterus. Oh, really? So that my hormones can be jacked and I'm on hormone stuff all my life? No, how about we look at how do we heal as the entire organism. Yeah, I have realized, Wise Mackie, how much they don't know. I literally, here's the thing, people say, well, doctors, and I say, you know what, I don't listen. Because I've literally done my own research on things that are wrong with me, and they asked me to send them the articles that I read. I was like, I talked to a doctor out in da-da-da who did studies on this and this and this and that, and they don't even know what's wrong with me. No doctor can understand. So I don't listen to them, because I don't know. They're like, well, we've done studies on this and I've seen studies on that, but I'm not really sure with you, blah, blah. And I'm like, never mind. I just do my own thing. Appreciate it. Thank you, but no thank you. I'll just take my herbs. I've done my own research. I've had to become my own doctor for myself, because they don't know what they're doing. Literally, they don't. And I don't mean it. I've saved myself from being a victim of theirs. Yeah, amen, sister friend. Check out, yeah, I've watched Greg Braden. Love him. Read his books. I think he has a couple of books. Can't remember what they are, but yeah, I've followed Greg Braden before. But I've never watched his YouTube. Certainly wished I could get to it. While you're studying my own stuff, I'm like, oh, I have all these books I have to read. It's a lot. But I got through my first semester of my master's program, so woo, 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 woo. Chinga, chinga, chinga. I'm excited about that. So, Wise Vacuum, you got to get on here someday. We keep saying it, but just would love to have you as a guest, and then you could just take over the show, girl. For maybe on a weekend. But yeah, definitely. I know it's like life is busy. Oof, I don't know. I was working from home, and I had to hire my niece as my assistant because I couldn't do it all. I was like cooking, cleaning, trying to work, doing this, doing that. And then if the house was dirty, I would want to do that first. It's just hard. Mentally, I was like, I need to figure this out. Okay, off topic. Squirrel. I always do that. Squirrel. Ooh, what? Let's talk about that. But again, vulnerability, big one. I love vulnerability. It's scary at first. People say, God, you're so authentic. You're so real. I love that. I'm like, yeah, I'm so vulnerable. I'm willing to go first. I'm willing to let out all my junk, to give permission to others. But again, human, not perfect. So there are things that I've done, and people will say this and that, and I'm willing to hear their feedback. Like, oh, Natalie, you did this. I'm like, oops, sorry. I wasn't aware. Now that I am, I can work on it. I have friends who say, well, you don't ever reach out to me. And I'm like, oh, sorry. I kind of don't reach out to anybody. I just kind of stay by myself. It's not like I'm reaching out to some people and not others. Maybe I'm just in my room reading or listening to or writing a paper for my master's or working out. Like, that's my life. But then I had to listen to the feedback and say, okay. And then I started calling my friends and, checking in on them at least a little bit more. But at least the feedback, right? Like, oh, you're selfish. Well, maybe. I'm sure I am in a lot of ways. But for the betterment of humanity, at least, So there's feedback all the time, and that's okay. But the vulnerability of me being able to express it is what's important. It gives you permission to remember that none of us are perfect, and it's okay. You don't have to feel bad about that. You don't have to be ashamed. Um, or you can if you choose to. But all it does is inflict pain. Pain in places that, I mean, it's important to have for growth, but to stay there, that's what, Wise Mackie was saying. Don't just keep the lid on it, don't just stew in it. You can if you want to, but the result is detrimental to you, basically. And it could, if it comes out in rage, it could be detrimental to other people as well. So, highly encourage that you check into that a little bit. Are you doing harm to yourself? Why? Okay. So there you have it. I love you guys so much. And it's Friday, so have a fantastic, funky, phenomenal, freaky, fabulous Friday. And I'm going to dance today. Yes, Wise Mackie. Message me. Maybe next weekend. I would love to have you next weekend. Or maybe the week. Or you know what? Let's do this, Wise Mackie. Why don't we have you come on after my first semester of my master's program's over so I can get through my finals. And then after finals are done, then you can come on and I'll have that free time. And maybe you can even come on during the week after like a special session after, because I do the live stream, or I can get you on Facebook, I guess, if you choose to. But it's up to you. Anyway, we could do it after final. That would be great. So let's get you on here. I'd love to have you as a guest. Okay. So there you have it. I love you guys. Have the best day ever. And I hope this technology gets better. So thank you very much.